kids and college kids could not fix. This is another thing that we ran into. The park was using the place as a kind of like a dump. They didn't have any other place to put this kind of stuff, but the CCC was kind of handy. This was a pile of 300 and some odd picnic tables that were all busted. And we had to get rid of them because there's a lot of important CCC POW stuff underneath that pile. This picture was taken the day that one guy, Dan Wilson was the guy's name. He took it upon himself to get rid of this pile of picnic tables. This was the day he broke through the pile so we could get to the other side. And like I said, one guy did this. This is what it looked like a couple of years ago. The pile of picnic tables was right here. We saved the good tops and made bridges and stuff like that out of them. We wasted nothing. We made some good picnic tables out of them. This is how we removed the brush. The guy that cleared the picnic tables away, he also invented this gizmo called a brush buggy. That you could pull it over stumps, you could pull it over rocks. It was pulled easy. It was easy to load and it was easy to unload. And the rule was if you loaded it, you got to unload it. That's my wife. She's pulling it. She loaded it. She unloaded that thing dozens and dozens and dozens of times. This is what you see now. This is where Mary was standing right here. Mary was standing here with Al Chike in that first picture. This is what it looks like now. A lady down in Albany, she's in the office of New York State Historic Preservation. She got us a couple of grants. She got us a grant for these little benches. We got 5 of these. And this little walkway, not very long, a little over 1/10 of a mile. But hey, it's a start. It's a start. We need a lot more of these walkways. It would have been nice if they put the walkway over the top of the original walkway. In your page 1, the walkway is down through here. This is where they put it. All the way around off to the side. But hey, close enough. That's better than nothing. It looks real pretty. You kind of like want to take your picture. Get your picture taken in the fall. The mess hall is back here. And this, again, Mary Smith was standing down here with Al Chike. We also have a grant that gave us some of these. There's 33 of these. You can walk around the place, and you're not flying blind. You can look at the picture, and you can read what you're supposed to be looking at here. Now let's get to some of the guys, some of the people who were in our CCC camp. These guys were in our CCC camps. I don't know any of them. Mary Smith doesn't know any of them. It's just a picture that showed up at one of the reunions. Now, what I want you to look at is the guy in the middle. Now, we'll interpret for the people in the back. This guy here, pretending he's Napoleon, look at the look on his face. Is that a look of satisfaction or what? Now, how old do you think he is? Most of the kids that I do this program for, they know immediately. About 13 years old. Now, I told you before, you had to be 13 to 27 to be in the CCC. And not 30, I'm sorry, you had to be 17 to 27 to be in a CCC. How the heck does a 13-year-old kid get in the CCC? Now, this is not an anomaly. This was quite common. I've talked to living, breathing CCC graduates, and they'll tell you that this was a common occurrence in those barracks. In a barracks of 40 guys per barracks, you could always count on a couple of them being 13 years old. Well, here's what happens. Maybe not in this case, but I'm going to make this case the story that I know for sure. Let's call him Jason. Jason's mother lives next door to a guy, a family who did have a 17-year-old, or an 18 or a 19-year-old. And she looks over there and, God, the kid's got candy. And boy, you can smell supper cooking a block away. I mean, she couldn't do it because she only had a 13-year-old. So what does she do? She writes him a letter, and she sends him to downtown Rochester. And he goes in the office, and he presents the letter, and it says, "Dear CCC guys, please forgive my son. We can't find his birth certificate anywhere. The town, village offices burned down. Everything was destroyed. But we know he looks young, but so did his father, and so did his uncle. You know? And so the CCC board goes like this. And he goes, they figure anybody that wants that bad to go in there and work for the CCC to improve the infrastructure ought to be given a chance. And so look at that kid. Why wouldn't he be happy? There's a 13-year-old, he is supporting his family. He's only getting 16 cents a day. He gets $5 at the end of each month. And they give it to him. You hear that? They give it to him in Hilton, or in Hamlin. They gave it to him in silver dollars. That's so when you're standing in line, you could hear it. And you just kept moving towards that noise. You see, the guy that told me that, he says, he was down to Letchworth for a while, and they paid him in dollar bills, paper dollar bills. He says, it was hard to stay in line to wait for 5 paper dollar bills, you know. But then, so this kid, why wouldn't he be happy? Now, wouldn't it, just think about what goes on in Rochester these days, with the knifings and the killings and the tire slashings and so on and so forth. If we had some kind of program that would do to their heads what was done to this guy's head here, boy, we certainly would solve a whole bunch of problems, wouldn't we? Now, here's a guy that told me about the young guys in the barracks. That guy's 93 years old. His name is Don Monero. His neighbor heard about the CCC camp, put him in a car, dragged him there, had me meet him there for a tour. And he complained, all the way out of the car, all the way over to here. He says, what are they bringing me here for? He says, I'm 93 years old. He said, I don't remember any of that stuff. But as soon as he saw this, he goes, oh, that's a quote. He goes, oh, and he said, that's exactly the way it was. So I called everybody over. And I stood him at the end. They gathered all here on the side. And I said, ladies and gentlemen, Don Monero is going to take the first walk down this walkway he's had in 70 years. And he buried down that thing for crying out loud like he was a drum major. It was fantastic. And after that, you couldn't shut him up. The whole rest of the tour, yeah. We learned his whole life history in the next half hour for crying out loud. Heck of a guy. This guy here. That's George Weissing. He was from the Hamlin Hilton area, and he was at one of our talks. They videotaped it, but I never did get a tape for the doggone thing. But halfway through the talk, way back there a ways, he jumps up, puts his cane up in the air, turns around to the cameraman, and he says, I'm here to tell you the best 6 months of my life was spent in the Hamlin CCC camp. He said, he turns around and sits back down again. Well, I went right up to him afterwards, found out where he lived, went to his apartment, an assisted living place, and I took a whole bunch of pictures with him to look at. But it was kind of a selfish thing. I had a picture here that, here it is. I wasn't so sure Mary had that label right. It says barracks number 4. So I asked George, I said, George, is that really barracks number 4?
You just push that up higher and
put higher. How's that? Okay, very good. And as soon as I pop that picture down, and you see him looking at it in that previous slide, he says, my God, he says, that's me. That's me in there. He said, of course, it's barracks number 5. And he started naming all these guys. He gets down to this guy here. He says, you know who that is? I said, well, how the hell would I know who that is? He said, that's the barracks bully. The barracks bully. Oh, yeah. He said, when I first came in there, they warned me. They said, well, you got to watch out for so-and-so. When he comes in there, he's called the barracks bully. And George, he's a little bit shorter than me, George is. George says, you want I should take care of him? And they look, well, could you? And she sure enough did. As soon as this guy comes in, confronted George decked him. Under the bunk he went, and he crawled out on his hands and knees. And that's the last problem they had. See, there's George. There's George right there. There's the bully. You see the bully to the left of him in the picture? He had no trouble with it at all. That's because George was brought up downtown Rochester in the pool halls. And the first thing he did when in the pool hall was to go in the back to see where the exit was, just in case he needed it. I mean, that's where George was brought up, but a heck of a guy. Then there's this guy. This guy is our hero. He is one of the guys we had marked that big picture of all the people in the 1939 class of CCC guys. That's Jimmy Gincadering. They call him Jimmy G. In the Hamlin CCC newspaper, they called him the Lady Killer. And he was a real good-looking guy. His father died in a fire up on Dewey Avenue where it meets the lake. There was a glass factory there. His father died. And his mother didn't speak a word of English, only Italian. She was stuck with 3 kids, him, a younger brother, and a pregnant sister. And so he joined the CCC. He dropped out of the school in junior year, and he ended up in Hamlin. Now, he's the poster child for CCC guys as far as I'm concerned. The thing that I've learned most about my CCC research is that a CCC graduate doesn't tell anybody anything. It's all secret. Nobody knows they were even in it if they can keep it that way. And if they find out in the CCC, only occasional small story or something. For some strange reason, these CCC guys just plain did not advertise the fact they were in the CCC. And this guy was a prime example. This guy not only told it didn't tell his family, but I'll leave that back. Let me tell you something. He thought enough about it, not to tell anybody, but something inside of him made him just cherish the CCC experience that words make it hard to explain. He kept a diary. I have never read in any of my research about any CCC guy that kept a diary. This guy kept a diary. He carried this thing around his shirt 365 days a year with a pencil. I couldn't get kids to bring a pencil to class once a week. And he carries his pencil around with his, and he fills 2 of these little notebooks, these spiral notebooks, and I have them. And he got 133 letters were sent to him when he was in the CCC, and I've got them all. He put them in a big paper bag along with this and a whole bunch of other things. His report card from the last year in school, and his application to join the CCC. I got all of this stuff. He put it in a paper bag, and he stashed it in the attic in Kendall. He lives on Emerson Street in Rochester. What the heck's it doing in Kendall? But that's where it was found. A month before the house burned down that had the stuff in it, it was in a garage sale out in front. And a lady in Kendall rescued it, gave me a telephone call and says, hey, would you be interested in any letters written to a guy that And I said, why? She was probably still holding the phone when I got there. Some words. But here it is. Here's a bunch of the letters. Pass them around. I have a bunch of them in a fireproof container, but I save a bunch of them here just so you can see them. And this guy, like I said, he's the poster child for CCC guys. Now this is his daughter and her husband. The West Side News did a little story about finding the letters and what have you, and somebody put that on her mother or on her screen. She was a teacher in downtown Rochester, and before she left from school that day, she looked on her screen, and there was this article from the West Side News put on sideways. So she's standing like this, reading it, and she couldn't believe it. Jimmy Gincadering, that's my father, and she starts crying. She didn't have a single thing that her father ever touched when her father died. Nothing. She didn't have the foggiest idea he was in the CCC. Not the least idea. She got a hold of me. She checked every Evans in the phone book, and she met me at my house, and I shared one letter with her. She agreed I should keep these letters for our future museum, but there was one real racy letter in there. I figured, well, that would look good in a Hamlin museum, so I gave her that one. She's got that one, and I have the rest of them, and that's some of them there. But that's a really weird story that the CCC guys Didn't want anybody to know they were in a CCC. Well, here's another guy. This guy, his name was Turpin. Now, this was a rock found in the Hamlin State Park. The park manager wanted me to find out the story behind this rock before he let people go visit it, see? And, well, I unraveled the mystery. Thank God for Jimmy Chincatter, the previous guy. His stuff was full of clues. There's what the rock looked like. Well, you gotta subtract 1 foot worth of dirt. There's dirt and stuff that have built up. This thing here was a perfect height for somebody like me to sit down on. And the top of it was carved with a chisel to fit the contours of my behind. So the guy that did this thing, it was a place to sit and meditate, kind of a thing. But his name was Turpin. Anyway, I found the guy. I didn't find the guy. He had since died, but I got a hold of his family. And I invited his family to the park. They all sat on the rock so they could see that their family was as famous as theirs. And this guy, he ended up going into World War II. He was in the Navy. He dropped dead in his daughter's driveway at age 56. But up at that particular time, the family was trying to figure out a lot of weird things he was doing. He was dragging the family to CCC state parks all over New York State. And after they visited them all once, he started doing it again, year after year after year. And it was a process of doing it with his grandkids when he dropped dead in her driveway. But as they took the tour, they finally figured out a whole bunch of things about their dad. He had learned to cook, but he couldn't cook but apple pies that were this big. Learned it in the kitchen. And he could make things out of sewing canvas. He was a wood carver. He had the only Medina sandstone barbecue in all of Buffalo. That's because they built all those buildings in Hamlin State Park in Medina sandstone. I mean, they traced everything back there. And we got to the education building, and I told him the courses that the guys took there. And all of a sudden, his daughter says, "My God," she said, "that explains it." He says, "I'm having trouble with algebra, and my father, who had a 6th grade education, is helping me with algebra." She says, "It never dawned on me. Where did he learn algebra?" The CCC. That's what we had in the CCC. Well, the CCC didn't last forever. The CCC, by 1941 in Hamlin, they couldn't find enough guys to fill the beds. And the war was about to come. The war hadn't started yet, but downtown Rochester was making cots and canteens and mess kits and stuff for our allies, and so nobody was out of work anymore. You could come down your street and you could get to 8 or 9 before you came to a house where there wasn't any supper going on that night. But this picture here, you look at page 2 on yours. This is your page 2 is a little like this one. This is another aerial photo of the CCC camp, except the north in this one is up. Yeah, on page 1, the government took that picture. North is to the left. All over the United States, north is always up. And the farmers across the street from the CCC took this one, so north is up. And this is where Mary was standing with she was standing right here in that original picture. But this is after the CCC closed. Now we know it's after the CCC closed because there's no trucks, there's no people walking around, and there's something missing right here. Right there, there's supposed to be this. That, in terms of CCC camp, is a skyscraper. That's the rock crusher. See how high it is? And it's missing. So that previous picture that I had on there, your modified picture on page 2, is after the CCC closed. Now, for some strange reason, after the CCC closed, they didn't tear it down. Nobody knows why. They just left it there. They hired a guy every day to walk around and make sure they weren't throwing rocks through the windows and stuff like that. But pretty soon, they found a use for this CCC camp. World War I, World War II starting, they had an awful problem finding enough people to get the crops out of the fields and into the canning factories. And then after they got the canning factories, there wasn't anybody working in the canning factories, they had a hell of a problem. Well, they tried having kids spend their first 4 hours of their school day working around Hamlin in a canning factory in the fields. That didn't go over so good. Then they had sailors come up from the Sampson Air Force, or Naval Base, and that didn't work so good either. So pretty soon, they start bringing up migrants from the Bahamas. These are Bahamians. There's 60 of them here, and they are in this building right here on your page 1. Those 60 Bahamians are crammed in there with a whole bunch of Hilton and Hamlin Lutherans that showed up every Sunday to make sure that they were getting religion and a picnic lunch afterwards. And that gives you a rough idea of how big that building is. Look at the number of people that they crammed in there. Now, at the end of the summer that they were there, they still needed labor, but by that time, they were bringing Italian prisoners over here. And so for 2 months, we had the advantage of having Italian prisoners work in the Duffy Mott canning factory. And here's another one. They're all blurry there. It's not because they've been drinking. It's just because the picture was blurry. It's the best we could get. But those are Italian POWs, and they worked for 80 cents a day, but unfortunately they were here for only 2 months. It was kind of nice having them. We didn't have to have barbed wire or nothing. They were docile as all heck. You didn't even need to carry a gun if you were guarded. They weren't going to hurt anybody. They didn't put any restrictions on the in and out of the camp or nothing. But in 2 months, Mussolini and his significant other got strung up on some street corner someplace, and now Italy was our ally. They weren't our enemy anymore. And you can't keep your allies, the people on your side in the prison camps, so they had to go. So what happened, what they did, they heard that they had been bringing in German prisoners. Now they were a little bit different. They had a lot of Nazis mixed in with the ordinary enlisted men. And the Nazis were dangerous people. But what they would do is they would bring these prisoners, these German prisoners, over here, because they're easier to handle over here than the war was going on over there. They had their hands full with repatriating cities and towns and stuff. So they sent the POWs over here. But they sent them to Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, that part of the country, a long ways from the oceans, and sorted out as best they could the Nazis. And then what was left, they would send back our way. And we inherited a bunch of them, provided we could meet the restrictions. The government says, you have got to provide a POW camp. We're not going to provide it. You've got to pay for it. So Duffy Mott's and the other canning factories in the area and the farmers, the Growers Association, they get together and they raise the money and meet the qualifications, and they turn the CCC camp into a prisoner of war camp that meets the government's specifications. It had to have a barbed wire fence 8 feet high, and there had to be a 3-foot lean-in. There had to be a main gate, and there had to be this and that and a whole bunch of other things. And so we, 14 years ago, we started trying to get a picture of this POW camp. Mary Smith had tried for years, and she couldn't get one. For 14 years, we can't get one. We've written to everybody in Washington you can write to. We've written to the Army Corps of Engineers. You name it, we have tried. There are no pictures available. But we got lucky. Miracle number 2. Right about in this area over here, there was one fence post, one post that held wire together. That when the camp finally closed, and they ripped it apart. And to try to erase the earth from there ever having been a POW camp there, they broke off one of those 300 posts that stood about yay high, about knee high. That post has stayed there undisturbed for 70-some years. When I found the thing, figured out what it was, and dug down and found out there was a piece of barbed wire that ran right by the thing, bingo, I knew we had the beginnings of an unraveling of the mystery of the POW camp. On our hands and knees, we walked around this entire place, digging every 20 feet to find the wire, to establish the fact of where the wire was. Now, we knew how high it had to be and what a rough idea what it had to look like, but then we started getting other things. A lady shows up and she told us where the guard tower was here and where the main gate was. We kept finding these light pole, guided by wires, and that helped us out. And then we got some help from a couple of actual prisoners that filled in some more of the business. And so finally we were able to come up with a final picture 1 month ago. That picture is only a month old, and it's thanks to Mark over there. He knew somebody, I think it was his brother, who could Photoshop and took out all the stuff that's not supposed to be in there from your page 2. So your page 2 turns into this when you take out all the unnecessary stuff. It took a lot of research to figure out what's supposed to come out of there. And now some of you have a page 2 that is this one. We ran out, there's such a big crowd here, I ran out of the usual handouts. And I had a reserve supply there for future tours of the site, and now they're all gone. They're out there, so some of you already have this particular version. So you can call this what it is. This is the Hamlin POW, German World War II prison camp on opening day. Opening day. It changed a little bit. You'll notice the recreation building is outside. But in the whole show. Anyway, where was I? Oh, the recreation building was not in there. For some strange reason, when they okayed this plan for the POW camp at their expense, they left that out. But I got a hold of a German POW living in Germany who started pen paling me for about 10 years. And he was in this barracks, that barracks right there. His bunk was right back here. He was one of the very first prisoners moved into this camp in June of 1944. He helped organize a sit-down strike of all the guys in his barracks. One of the first things I noticed when I got there was no place to go play chess. There was no place to go read a magazine or get a magazine. No recreation facility whatsoever. So they had a sit-down strike. And he described the guards coming through a gate here, which you wouldn't know was there unless you had a guy here telling us it was there. And the guards came through with their guns, and they confronted the guys, and they asked them what was wrong. And they said, we need a place to recreate. And the guards left. He says, a few days later, we had a recreation center. What they did was to cut the wire here, hook it to the back end of the building here, and rehook it here. And so now the recreation building was part of the POW camp. And that was verified later by one of Mary's POW contacts, who told us what was in there, and what he described was the CCC recreation center. So all these little bits and pieces start to come together. Now we've had some other things that we could add. I don't know how it happened, but Oakfield, New York, their prisoner of war camp, had a picture. This is a picture in Oakfield, New York. This is the canning factory. It's still there. That tower is still there. But they had a picture of the barbed wire fence. And ours had to look the same way because they were following the same rules and regulations. Now, this is what the guard tower would have looked like. We could have had this guard tower. This guard tower, until about 3 years ago, was standing over at Odenbach's at the end of Dewey Avenue. They invited us to come get it and establish it in our camp. But the park says too expensive to move, so we didn't get it. It's been smashed, but we do have a picture of it. This has happened a few times. We had a guy who was the blacksmith's son for the Hamlin CCC camp, who's here tonight, by the way. He came up to me once and he says, I have all of the tools of the CCC blacksmith shop, every one of them. I inherited them. He says, and I'll donate them to this site if they rebuild a blacksmith shop. I'll bring these things in. And I told the park about this, and they said, well, now the likelihood of us rebuilding a blacksmith shop is pretty slim. So the guy came up to me a little later, a couple of years or so later. He says, I'll make a deal with you. He says, to start the ball rolling, he said, I will finance the building of one of the barracks, the 112-foot long, 20-foot wide barracks. He said, that'll get the ball rolling. Maybe somebody would donate some more money and stuff. But that didn't fly either. The guy is here. Where's the blacksmith? Where is he? There he is, right back there. If some of you like to talk to him afterward about it, there he is. That's just some of the problems we've been having with this thing. That's one of the reasons why this is my last talk. I've gone 14 years doing this thing, and this is as far as I can get. And 81 years old. Driving after dark is not my favorite. But anyway, there were 14 prisoner of war camps in western New York. Most people didn't know there was even one. But no, there were 14. And ours was the second largest of all of them. Now, this says Albion. No, there's a question mark after it. It's on here because I had to give a talk to Albion once, and they swore up and down they had a POW camp. Well, they didn't. When they woke up in the morning, the prisoners from Hamlin had already arrived there by bus, and they assumed that they had slept there overnight. They had come by bus. And so they went home for supper, and of course then our prisoners left, and they just thought for sure they didn't. But there's where the prisoner of war camps were in western New York. There were a bunch of prison camps in the United States. I think you have this in your folder also. This says there's 511. There was only 370 some odd German prisoner of war camps. This is Italian and Japanese and so on. But there were only 377 German prisoner of war camps, and ours was one of them. We had quite a congestion, as you can see, of prisoner of war camps up there. Here's how they got here. Here's the start. This is Antwerp. This was called the city of sudden death during World War II. This is where the prisoners were herded aboard a ship. This is John Partridge, Colonel John Partridge. You have a relative back there?
Yep. My father-in-law.
Oh, hi, how you doing? I wondered if he was going to be here. And that's his dad. He herded these guys aboard the ship, and of course, all of the enlisted Germans were just as glad as hell to get the heck out of there. He didn't know when one of those V-2 bombs was going to drop in on a hospital or something and obliterate everybody. And look at this guy here. I asked John, I said, John, are you responsible for that Band-Aid on his chin? And he just says, no comment. And yeah, that's one of the Nazis. They were sent over here with the rest of them, and then we had to kind of like weed them out. But anyway, that's the start of the parade. Here's what some of the, here's the, I forgot this was in here. Now when you read, when you do research of